Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you are not already, and drop a like on this video. But with that, we're doing hot takes, and that is the only intro required. Mikal Bridges is criminally underrated. I'm definitely not biased. Well, you definitely are biased, but you are right that Mikal Bridges is underrated. He's a very good 3-and-D player and like a guy who just finds a way to score in ways outside of just being a spot shooter, but he's one of the better perimeter defensive players in the league. In fact, he's probably in all defensive team conversations, and he's just an overall very impactful and winning forward, which is the type of player you need in today's game. Julius Randle is a product of Tom Thibodeau and is overrated. I've heard this a couple of times, like someone said that Randle's jump as a playmaker and shooter is because of better coaching and a little bit better teammates, but like that's not really how progression in basketball works unless Tibbs just straight up taught a like 26-year-old Julius Randle how to shoot a basketball, and I don't think he did that based on Tibbs' track record with his teams. I'm guessing he's not the best shooting coach in the world, and typically teams hire shooting coaches outside of the head coach to do that. So I don't think Thibodeau magically turned Julius Randle into a 40% three-point shooter who's taken him off of the dribble. I don't think he magically made Julius Randle one of the best playmaking power forwards in the league. I don't think he magically made him a great mid-range shooter. That's not how it works. Like, Julius Randle made these improvements himself, and to attribute it to anyone else is pretty ludicrous. He has statistically had the biggest leap as a three-point shooter in, I believe, NBA history. So to just say, better coaching, and that sums it up, that's ludicrous. Rudy is better than Rusty. See, I am looking for hot takes here, not objective truths. Please don't get confused next time. The Lakers are going to get bounced out in the first round even with a healthy LeBron. I absolutely would not bet on this happening, but LeBron coming late in the process towards the regular season, Anthony Davis not looking good for the Lakers thus far, and just there being a weird mesh of what's going on with this team this year. It's a little disjointed, so if they got an unfavorable first-round matchup, especially with the Lakers dropping in the standings, I wouldn't be exactly shocked if they did lose in a 7-game series in the first round if they just got a really tough matchup and the things were just not going the way they should be. But again, I'm not going to be betting on that outcome. Nikola Jokic is the best passer ever, touch for touch. I'm going to assume by touch for touch he means like he makes the most passes out of the percentage that he is used. There was just a video made by Thinking Basketball where he talked about how Jokic doesn't dominate the ball, but he's still like a dominant passer. So I'm assuming that's what he means by this. Nikola Jokic, I think, is like one of the few players that I've seen where a system is more dominated by one individual's playmaking ability. There are, of course, other teams in the past, but in the NBA today, a team's strengths being dominated by one playmaker is not really a thing anymore. Is a thing of the past that is generally not happening anymore. I think Luka Doncic right now in Dallas is like the only clear example, maybe a little bit of Trae Young in Atlanta, but it's not something that happens as much as it used to. But Jokic is definitely an all-time great passer, and I find it funny when people say like, oh, Nikola Jokic is the best passing center ever. Like, that's not blatantly obvious. He's also just one of the best passers ever, period. So shout out Nikola Jokic, I guess. The narrative that you have to take your team to a higher seed to be in the MVP conversation is stupid. Well, first of all, it's not a narrative, it's a precedent. I'm sure it was a narrative back when that was a thing in the 60s, but being that that precedent has been set and has continued on for decades and decades, it's not a narrative, it's pretty much a fact that you have to be one of the top seeds to win MVP outside of a few outliers. So it's not a narrative, it's a precedent. Now, if you want to say that that precedent should not exist and that it should simply be the most valuable player to their team, which right now this year is Stephen Curry on the Warriors, sure, but it's not a narrative, and I still disagree. I think the MVP should be given, maybe the award should be titled differently, I don't know what it would be, but the MVP should go to a player who's on one of the best teams in the league, just in my opinion. Replace Paul George with Devin Booker and the Clippers would be better. If Paul George just once again completely shits the bed in the playoffs, then maybe I would agree with this. But in terms of just pure fit with the Clippers, Devin Booker is kind of in a similar boat with Kawhi offensively in terms of the mid-range shots that they like to take, and they play in similar spots in the court, which is a problematic thing when you have two players who play in the same area of the floor and kind of create offense in similar ways. It gets redundant if you have both of them on the floor at the same time. It's like, why do I need both of these guys doing the same exact thing? Paul George paired next to Kawhi is much more of a three-point shooter, more of a ball handler, and a bit more of a playmaker. So that's a better fit for the Clippers than what Devin Booker would be there. And then you add on to it that, defense is a thing, and Paul George is just simply better than Devin Booker. I completely disagree with this notion. Now, we have not seen Devin Booker in the playoffs. If Devin Booker was some elite playoff performer, we end up finding that out this year. Maybe I would semi-agree with this, just because Paul George, ever since he has declared himself to be playoff P, has been pretty bad in the playoffs. Otherwise, though, I'm gonna go with Paul George pretty confidently in that regard. The Rockets' small ball team would have been more successful if it weren't for the pandemic. I actually think I'm gonna make a video on the small ball Rockets, because one thing that really, I'm not gonna say the phrase grinds my gears. One of the things that really pisses me off is the notion that small ball is the reason why the Rockets lost when it wasn't. The reason why the Rockets lost was that Russell Westbrook was having health issues, and the Lakers developed a defensive scheme to leave Russell Westbrook completely open on the perimeter, and he just wasn't making the shots because he was both unhealthy and also Russell Westbrook. So the reason the Rockets failed was not small ball. The reason the Rockets failed was that. And like, people are like, oh, AD went off in the series. Well, the thing is, sure, he did. But AD did it from the mid-range when everyone talked about how AD was just going to dominate in the paint against PJ Tucker. But PJ forced him to take the lower percentage shot on a regular basis. And to me, that's a victory. I would rather AD, when I have a 6'5" guy guarding him, take a mid-range fadeaway than bully him down to the basket. And to me, that's an absolute victory. And the reason they failed was the offensive end of things, not the defensive end of things. And when people act like it's a small ball, it kind of pisses me off, because I'm like, did you watch the same series that I did? Anyways, that's that. They would have probably been more successful if it weren't for the pandemic, because Russ probably would have been able to attack closeouts better. He had something going on with COVID, and then he also had some sort of, I think it was a hip injury. I can't remember what it was, actually. Something in the lower body. Yeah, definitely Russ was not 100%, and the Lakers took full advantage of that. Fuck the fans, keep it a pickup environment. That is a horrible take, because I think this just stems from not having watched games with like a packed arena in a very long time. But if you go back and watch highlights of like playoff moments, or even just regular season moments when there is a full crowd in the arena, it is so much different. I've said this before a couple of times, talking about the bubble and what the NBA has been this year with no fans up until recently. Like, an arena packed full of fans when a poster happens or a game winner happens, the energy in the building when that happens is unbelievable. So, not fuck the fans. It's definitely good to have that energy in the building, especially for big moments. Like, I don't want to see a game winner in the playoffs and then it's an audio generated crowd noise. Fuck that shit. That's horrible. Having the fans in the arena is much better. Stephen Curry is a better offensive player than Kevin Durant. This does not mean he's a better scorer, but he is a better overall offensive player. Well, to me, Steph Curry is the best offensive player of all time, period. So, sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that's a ludicrous take, because I've said before with Steph Curry, just simply the fact that he is going to generate offense for other people just simply by existing in a level that doesn't happen with any other player ever. That's what makes Steph the best offensive player of all time to me, because his ability to generate offense for his teammates by being Stephen Curry is unmatched. There's no other player in history who can create offense for his teammates to the extent that Steph can just by being themselves, because the threat of Steph shooting is so terrifying to defenses that they consistently make obvious, stupid mistakes, because they're terrified of Steph. So yeah, Steph Curry is the best offensive player of all time. I said this before, but gonna continue to say it here. Anyways, that is the end of this video. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. But yeah, that's it. Bye.